It was a quiet evening in the upscale neighborhood, the kind where the only sound was the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the pristine, tree-lined streets. The whole neighborhood seemed to be in a peaceful lull, the kind of calm that makes you forget anything could go wrong. But that peace was shattered by the unmistakable roar of an engine. A massive motorcycle came roaring down the street, its powerful engine cutting through the air like a knife. The rider was a huge man, his figure towering and intimidating, with spiked hair and a long leather jacket that made him look like he had just stepped out of a gang movie. The bike screeched to a halt just a few feet away from a young girl standing alone on the sidewalk. Maya, a 10-year-old girl with long braided hair, stood still, her eyes focused on the ground. She had been walking home from the park, lost in her thoughts when the sound of the motorcycle had startled her. She glanced up, her gaze meeting the cold, menacing eyes of the man on the bike. Her heart skipped a beat. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The world around her, the trees, the houses, the setting sun, it all faded into the background. All that mattered was the intimidating figure in front of her, staring her down with an unsettling intensity. "What do you think you're doing out?" "Here alone, kid?" The man sneered, his voice low and gravelly. Maya swallowed hard. She wasn't the type to back down easily, but something about this man made her nervous. She tried to keep her composure, but her hand instinctively reached for the small pouch at her waist, where she kept her pepper spray. Before she could react, the man swung his leg off the bike and took a few steps toward her. The street was empty. No one was around to help. No one was even looking out their windows. Maya knew she was on her own. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Could she defend herself, and just who was this stranger anyway? Before we dive into what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the twist that's about to shake everything up. Maya wasn't your average 10-year-old. She was tough, resourceful, and had been taught from a young age to always stand her ground. Raised by a single mother in the same upscale neighborhood, Maya had learned early on that life wasn't always as perfect as it seemed on the surface. Her mother, a hard-working woman who had sacrificed everything for her daughter, had always pushed Maya to be independent and to never let anyone take advantage of her. Maya's mother, a woman of few words, believed in showing love through strength, something Maya had come to appreciate even though it wasn't always easy. Her mother's lessons had served her well over the years. Maya was strong, both in body and mind, with an unshakable will. She wasn't the type of child to hide behind her mother's skirts or let fear control her. That's why, despite the intimidating biker standing in front of her now, Maya didn't show the fear she felt bubbling inside. She refused to, but this was different. This man was not just some random stranger. Maya knew something about him, even if it was only an inkling. Her instincts told her that he was trouble, real trouble. She had seen him before, just once, but that brief encounter had left a lasting impression. He had been lurking around the neighborhood, his presence too noticeable to be just coincidence. Maya had never been one to trust people easily, but something about him made her feel like he was more than just a bad guy on a bike. The man's name was Frank, and his reputation preceded him. Once a member of a notorious gang, Frank had turned to a life on the fringes of society after a series of bad decisions that led him to the wrong side of the law. He had been in and out of prison for years, and now, despite his attempts to lay low, he was back in town. And from what Maya had overheard in the few conversations she wasn't supposed to be listening to, he was looking for something valuable. Maya didn't know what it was, but her mother had always warned her that some people didn't just disappear into the past. They came back, and when they did, they often brought trouble with them. Why was Frank here? What did he want with Maya? Maya had no idea yet, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let him get away with whatever he was planning. Her heart raced, but she didn't show it. Instead, she straightened up, refusing to back down. This was her moment. Meanwhile, across town, Jason Statham and Keanu Reeves had just wrapped up a grueling day of training for a film project. Little did they know their skills would soon be put to the test in a situation far more real than any script could prepare them for. Jason and Keanu were not just actors. They were former military men who had served in high-stress combat situations. Over the years, they had grown close, their bond built on mutual respect for each other's abilities and strength. Though their public personas were action heroes, their friendship was rooted in something deeper, a shared understanding of what it meant to protect others. They had just pulled up in Keanu's sports car when they noticed the commotion down the street. The motorcycle, the man, and the girl. Maya. Without saying a word, Jason and Keanu exchanged glances. It was time to act. What would you do in Maya's shoes? Could she have known Frank's backstory? And would Jason and Keanu be able to stop him? In time? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Trust us, it's going to get intense. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment telling us what you think so far. The air around them thickened, heavy with tension. Maya's pulse pounded in her ears as Frank took another step toward her, his leather boots crunching on the pavement. His sneer deepened, his cold eyes scanning her with malice. "You think you're tough, huh?" Frank growled, his hand tightening around the handlebars of his bike. "You shouldn't be out here alone. You never know who you might run into." Maya stood her ground. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her, not after everything she had gone through. She had faced bullies at school, dealt with the struggles of growing up in a neighborhood that wasn't always kind, but she always held her own. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Stay strong, Maya. Don't let anyone make you feel small," but this felt different. Frank wasn't just a bully. He was dangerous. The kind of dangerous that had seen and done things Maya couldn't even imagine. He was the kind of man who wouldn't hesitate to hurt someone to get what he wanted. She took a step back, her hand still resting on the pepper spray at her waist. She wasn't sure if it would be enough, but she was ready to use it if she had to. Frank laughed, the sound low and menacing. "You really think that little spray is going to stop me? You're a brave little thing, too bad it won't save you." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had to think fast. She wasn't just up against a random bully anymore. This man had a dark past, and she didn't know what he was capable of. Her mind raced for options, but before she could make a move, she heard it. The roar of an engine, louder than Frank's. Jason and Keanu had arrived. Jason Statham's sports car screeched to a halt behind the motorcycle. Keanu Reeves, ever the calm presence, was the first to get out. The two of them moved quickly, their eyes scanning the situation. In an instant, they saw Frank, they saw Maya, and they immediately recognized the danger. Frank turned at the sound of the car, his eyes narrowing. "What's this? You think you can just walk in and save the day?" Jason stepped forward, his stance wide and ready. "I think it's time for you to leave." Keanu, ever the tactician, positioned himself slightly behind Jason, a move that immediately signaled their preparedness. They were ready for whatever came next. For a moment Frank hesitated, his tough exterior faltering just enough for them to see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But then the sneer returned, and he revved the engine of his bike, a dangerous grin spreading across his face. "You two don't know who you're dealing with," Frank snarled, his voice dripping with venom. He was trying to provoke them, to get them to make a move. But Jason and Keanu didn't flinch. They had been in countless situations like this before, and they knew how to deal with men like Frank. Their experience in high-stress situations made them the perfect team, a dynamic that had always allowed them to succeed against the odds. They weren't about to let him escalate things any further. "You're right about one thing," Keanu said coolly, his gaze never leaving Frank. "We don't know you, but what we do know is that you're about to make a huge mistake if you don't walk away now." Frank's hand tightened on the throttle, his eyes flicking between the two men, calculating. He wasn't used to being challenged, but the calm confidence that Jason and Keanu exuded made him pause just for a moment. Maya, still standing there, took in the scene. She felt a rush of relief as the two men positioned themselves between her and Frank. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. These two strangers, who looked like they had stepped out of a movie, were here to protect her. But even as she felt the tension ease, something didn't sit right. Frank wasn't just going to back down. He had a reputation, and if he was anything like the stories she had heard, he wasn't the kind to let someone get the best of him without a fight. Just as the standoff reached its peak, Frank revved the bike again, louder this time, and lunged forward, aiming to push his way past Jason and Keanu. But Jason was faster. He reached out and grabbed the front of the bike, stopping it dead in its tracks. The sound of metal grinding against rubber echoed in the air. "Enough," Jason said firmly. "This ends now." Frank's eyes burned with anger, but for a brief moment he seemed to recognize the futility of it all. He was outnumbered, and his rage only made him more unpredictable. "Get out of my way," he spat. But before the situation could escalate further, the unexpected happened. Maya, who had been watching the entire exchange, took a step forward. In her hand, she still held the small can of pepper spray, but there was something different in her eyes now. She wasn't just standing there anymore. Maya had made up her mind. What happens when Maya decides to take control? Can Jason and Keanu handle Frank's next move? And just what is Frank really after? Stick around for the next chapter. Trust us, things are about to get even crazier. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Maya stood tall, her fingers tightening around the pepper spray canister. She had always been taught to stand her ground. But now, with the situation escalating, her mind was racing. Frank was unpredictable. She couldn't let him intimidate her or anyone else any longer. She had been waiting for the right moment, and now she knew what she had to do. Jason and Keanu noticed her movement immediately. They both glanced at her, and there was an unspoken understanding between them. They could see she wasn't afraid. The girl had guts, and that was when things shifted. Frank's eyes locked onto Maya, his lips curling into a sinister smile. He thought she was just a scared kid, too naive to understand what he was capable of. But he was wrong. Maya wasn't afraid anymore. She took a deep breath, her body tense, and raised the pepper spray towards Frank. "Don't come any closer," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. For a moment it seemed like Frank would laugh it off. He was bigger, stronger, and far more intimidating than this little girl. But then he noticed the determination in her eyes. Something about her had shifted. She wasn't just a scared child anymore. She was ready to fight back. He hesitated just for a moment, but in that moment Jason and Keanu closed the distance. Jason, his body moving like a coiled spring, stepped forward in one swift motion. He grabbed the front of Frank's leather jacket and yanked him off the bike, throwing him to the ground with the kind of force that made the pavement shake. The surprise on Frank's face was evident. He hadn't expected the two men to be so quick, so ready for a fight. Keanu moved just as fast, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of danger. He was calculating, always thinking 3 steps ahead. His calm demeanor made him seem like a shadow, something that blended in the background but was always ready to pounce. He positioned himself between Maya and Frank, ensuring the girl stayed safe while Jason kept Frank occupied. The standoff had suddenly turned into a full-blown confrontation. Frank, now on the ground, scrambled to get up, but he wasn't quick enough. Jason stood over him, his hand raised as if to stop Frank from getting any funny ideas. "You've made a big mistake," Jason said, his voice low and menacing. "So you don't mess with people who know how to fight back," Frank growled, wiping blood from his lip as he slowly got to his feet. He was no stranger to pain. The rage in his eyes flared even hotter. He wasn't going to let this go. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he hissed. "This isn't over." Jason didn't flinch. "It is now." Keanu, his eyes never leaving Frank, spoke up. "You've got one chance to leave. Don't waste it." Frank glared at them, both his fists clenched. He was seething with anger, but the reality of the situation was slowly sinking in. There was no way he could take both of them on. The fight was already over before it had begun. But then Frank did something unexpected. His eyes flicked over to Maya, a dark, calculating look in his gaze. He wasn't done yet. In a split second, Frank lunged toward Maya, his hand reaching for her. Time seemed to slow as Jason and Keanu reacted at lightning speed. Jason grabbed Frank by the wrist, twisting it with enough force to make the biker drop to his knees. Keanu was right there, pulling Maya behind him, shielding her from Frank's lunge. "You're not touching her," Keanu said, his voice cold and unyielding. Frank snarled in frustration, but it was clear that he was losing this fight. His whole body tensed, and for a moment it looked like he was about to make another move. But the situation had shifted once more. Frank's bravado was gone, replaced by the stark reality that he was facing two men who were trained to neutralize threats, and Maya, who had just shown more courage than anyone expected. Frank's chest heaved with heavy breaths as he finally seemed to realize there was no way out. He had been beaten, and that realization seemed to hit him like a freight train. His eyes darted around, looking for any escape, but it was too late. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, and Frank's eyes widened in panic. It wasn't just Jason and Keanu he had to worry about anymore. "I'll be back," Frank spat, still trying to act tough despite the situation, but there was no hiding the fear in his voice now. Keanu glanced over his shoulder at the approaching sirens. "Not if the cops have anything to say about it." Jason nodded, his grip on Frank's wrist tightening just a little more. "It's over. This time you're not getting away." The sirens grew louder, and with a final glance of defiance, Frank let out a frustrated grunt and pulled away, stumbling backward. He didn't have the strength to fight anymore. He turned, retreating back toward his bike, and in one last act of defiance, revved the engine and sped off into the night. The tension that had filled the street dissipated almost immediately, but the aftermath of the encounter still hung in the air. Maya stood there, her breath shallow and fast, but her expression was different now. She wasn't the scared little girl who had been cornered by a dangerous stranger. She was someone who had taken control of her situation, and she had survived. Jason and Keanu, realizing the danger had passed, turned toward Maya. "You all right, kid?" Jason asked, his voice softening just a bit. Maya nodded, her eyes still wide but filled with a newfound confidence. "Yeah, I'm okay." Keanu gave her a small smile. "You did good, you didn't back down." Maya looked up at both of them, a sense of gratitude washing over her. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened without you." Jason clapped a hand on her shoulder. "You're tougher than you look. We're just glad we got here in time." Maya smiled back, feeling a weight lift off her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. But as she watched Frank's figure fade into the distance, one thought lingered. What was he really after? What is Frank truly searching for? Will Maya and her new friends be safe, or is this just the beginning? As the distant rumble of Frank's motorcycle faded into the night, a heavy silence settled over the street. The sirens had now passed, leaving only the sound of Maya's shallow breaths and the soft crunch of gravel underfoot as Jason and Keanu remained by her side. Her fingers still clenched around the can of pepper spray, though her grip had loosened. She had done it. She had stood up to him. But in that silence, Maya felt something shift deep inside her. It wasn't relief exactly, it was something else. Something far more complicated, a mix of confusion, fear, and adrenaline that had yet to fully settle. Jason was the first to break the silence. He stood a few feet away, hands on his hips, his expression hard but with a note of admiration for Maya. Keanu, ever the quiet observer, stood with his arms crossed, his gaze not leaving the young girl. Both men had been in countless dangerous situations before, but this was different. They hadn't expected a young girl like Maya to fight back, to show the kind of courage that most adults would have struggled to find. "Hey," Jason said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You okay?" Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide and slightly frantic. I don't know," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. But then I just did what I had to do." Keanu, who had been silent up until now, uncrossed his arms and stepped forward. His expression was calm, but there was a weight to his words. "You made the right call, you didn't run, that's something most people can't say." Maya swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She had always known she was strong, but in this moment, in the aftermath of facing a man like Frank, she was starting to feel the weight of everything. She wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. She had been tested, and she had survived. But the emotional toll was still there, a wave just under the surface, ready to crash. For the first time since the confrontation, tears welled up in her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. Maya wasn't one to cry. She had learned early on that tears didn't help anyone. But the truth was she was exhausted. All the fear she had pushed aside during the encounter with Frank came rushing back, and the adrenaline that had been fueling her slowly began to drain away. "I'm scared," she whispered almost to herself. "What if he comes back?" Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "We'll make sure he doesn't. You're not alone in this." Jason stepped forward, his voice steady but comforting. "What happened here tonight isn't your fault. Frankie is the one who messed with the wrong people. And trust me, if he shows up again, we'll be ready for him." Maya looked up at them, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Jason smiled, his gaze softening for the first time since the confrontation. "Don't mention it. We're just doing what anyone would do." Keanu, with his typical calm, added, "The real hero here is you. You stayed strong when most people would have crumbled." Maya looked down at her feet, her hands still trembling slightly. She couldn't deny that she was proud of what she had done, but the fear that lingered in the pit of her stomach wouldn't go away. She had stood up to Frank. But was that the end of it? Or was this just the beginning of something far more dangerous? Before she could voice her concerns, the sound of another engine broke through the stillness. Jason and Keanu tensed, their eyes immediately darting toward the noise. A black SUV turned the corner and slowed to a stop in front of them. The headlights illuminated their faces, casting long shadows in the dim streetlight. The door opened and a tall, imposing figure stepped out. It was a man they had seen before, someone who made them both tense as soon as his shoes hit the pavement. "Jason." "Keanu," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly. "I think we need to talk." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The man was familiar, though she couldn't place him immediately. But there was something about him that made her uneasy. He wasn't here for casual conversation. Jason's expression hardened, his stance shifting to something more guarded. Keanu stepped a little closer to Maya, shielding her from the man's view. "What do you want?" Jason asked, his voice sharp. The man took a step forward, his hands in his pockets. "I'm here to clean up a mess," he said, his eyes narrowing. "And you two are making it more complicated than it needs to be." Maya felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She had no idea what this man was talking about, but his presence was enough to send a chill through her. Frank hadn't been the only problem. Jason and Keanu exchanged a quick glance, their expressions unreadable. This was bigger than either of them had anticipated. The man's eyes flicked to Maya, who instinctively took a step back, her heart racing. He saw the fear in her, and a small, dangerous smile spread across his face. "I don't want any more trouble," he said, "but I'll do whatever it takes to make sure this all goes away." Keanu's gaze never left the man. "You should have thought of that before you got involved with Frank." Jason's fists clenched, his jaw tightening. "Who the hell are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he motioned toward the SUV as though the answer was already clear. Maya looked between Jason, Keanu, and the man in the SUV, feeling more out of place than ever. Whatever was going on, it was more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. Who is this new man, and what does he want with Maya, Jason, and Keanu? And what's the real danger that lies ahead? The air around them grew colder, the tension thickening with every passing second. Maya's heart was racing, her eyes flicking between Jason, Keanu, and the mysterious man who had just appeared. The man's cold, calculating smile made her skin crawl, and she could sense that something much bigger than she had ever imagined was at play. Jason stepped forward, his posture rigid, but there was an undeniable caution in his movements. "I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Keanu remained just behind him, his calm demeanor barely hiding the wariness in his eyes. He, too, could feel the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about some thug on a motorcycle anymore. There were bigger forces involved, and Maya had somehow become caught in the middle of it. The man didn't move, his gaze locked on Jason. "Answers? You're in no position to ask." "For answers," he said, his voice low and threatening. "But you will get them soon enough." Maya felt the cold dread creep back into her chest. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew it wasn't good. She wanted to step forward, to demand to know what was going on, but something inside her told her it wasn't her place. She wasn't part of their world. She had already fought hard enough to survive the night, but now it seemed like the storm was only beginning. "I'm not afraid of you," Jason spat, his hand tightening into a fist. "Whatever game you're playing, we're not backing down, not now, not ever." Keanu's eyes shifted to the SUV behind the man, noting the tinted windows, the way it seemed to be waiting like a predator lurking in the shadows. He knew better than anyone that when people like this showed up, it wasn't by chance, it was organized, strategic, and it spelled trouble. The man's eyes flicked to Keanu briefly, sizing him up before he turned back to Jason. "You're both out of your depth here. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. But don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you. Not yet, at least." Keanu's lips curled into a thin smile. "You don't scare us. And you're not going to intimidate a 10-year-old girl who's already faced more than you can imagine." He glanced at Maya, who was standing just behind him, trying to appear brave, but still trembling slightly. The man looked at Maya, his gaze unsettlingly cold. "You'd be surprised what people like her can survive, but you should be worried about what's next. This isn't over." Jason's patience was beginning to wear thin. "If you think we're going to just back off and let you do whatever you want, you're wrong." The man's smile faded, replaced by something darker. "You have no idea what you're up against." With that, he turned abruptly and walked back toward the SUV. As he opened the door and climbed inside, Jason and Keanu shared a brief silent exchange. Maya felt a sudden surge of fear. Who were these people? And what did they want with her? Why was she being dragged into something she didn't understand? The SUV's engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped off into the night. The street fell silent again, save for the sound of the wind and the distant hum of city life. Jason stood there for a moment, his fists still clenched, his jaw tight. Keanu remained stoic, but Maya could see the concern behind his eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to shake the lingering anxiety, but it wouldn't leave her. It gnawed at her, a feeling of uncertainty that wouldn't let go. Jason finally turned to her, his face softer now. "Maya, you okay?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure she was. She felt shaken more than she had been earlier in the evening. "What was all that about?" she asked, her voice small. "Who was that guy?" Jason glanced at Keanu before answering. "He's someone we've dealt with before, but not like this. He's part of a much bigger operation, one that we've been tracking for a while. They've been pulling strings from the shadows," Keanu added. "The man you saw tonight is no stranger to violence, but he's not going to be the one who puts an end to this. He's only one piece of a much larger puzzle." Maya looked at them both, her mind racing. She couldn't understand all of it, but one thing was clear. She had unwittingly become involved in something dangerous, something far more than just a random encounter with a biker. Jason kneeled down in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did well tonight. You stood your ground. But you're not alone in this. We're going to make sure you're safe." Maya felt a rush of gratitude wash over her, but it was tinged with fear. These men were her protectors, but she didn't know how long they could keep her safe. How far would Frank's associates go to get what they wanted? And what did they want with her? Keanu, ever the quiet one, spoke again. "We'll take care of things, but you need to stay close, Maya. We'll keep you safe. Whatever happens, we'll make sure you're not left in the dark." Maya nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I want to help. I want to understand what's going on. I don't want to just hide." Jason gave her a small smile. "And you won't have to? We'll fill you in when the time's right. Just know that you're stronger than you think." Maya's mind was still buzzing, but something about their words helped settle the storm inside her. She wasn't alone. And that, for now, was enough. As the night stretched on, the three of them walked back toward the safety of the house, though Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. What is this larger threat looming over Maya, Jason, and Keanu? Who is pulling the strings behind Frank and his associates? And why does it all seem to be tied to Maya? The quiet of the night was unsettling, almost suffocating. The three of them walked in silence, each wrapped in their own thoughts, though the weight of what had just transpired hung heavily over them. The streetlights flickered overhead as they made their way back to the house. Every step Maya took felt like it was leading her deeper, into a world she didn't fully understand, but one that was now inescapably tied to her fate. As they reached the front door of the house, Jason glanced at Maya, his eyes softening for a moment. "Listen, Maya," he said, his voice gentle but serious. "What happened tonight, what you've been through, it's just the beginning. But you need to know something. It's not going to get easier from here, it's going to get harder. There are people out there who won't stop until they get what they want," Keanu added, his voice as calm and steady as ever. "But that doesn't mean you're alone. We're here and we'll make sure you're safe. That's our promise." Maya nodded slowly, the fear still gnawing at her insides. She had faced her fear earlier, stood up to Frank and the man in the SUV, but now, as the adrenaline from the confrontation wore off, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was lurking just around the corner. She looked at Jason and Keanu, their faces serious but filled with an unspoken trust. They had made it clear they were willing to fight for her no matter what. But now she had to figure out what kind of fight it was. What kind of enemy were they up against? And what did they want with her? "What happens now?" Maya asked. Her voice barely a whisper. Jason's lips twitched into a grim smile. "Now we get ready. We track down every lead we can, and we find out who's really pulling the strings. We'll figure out why Frank and his associates are after you, and we'll make sure you're out of harm's way." Keanu nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We're not going to let them get to you. But you have to stay sharp, Maya. This isn't something that's going to be over tomorrow." Maya swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can handle all of this." Jason crouched down, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel like he truly understood. "You've already handled more than most people ever will, and that's why we believe in you. You're strong. You've got the heart of a fighter. That's something they can't take from you." Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice a quiet reassurance. "The key now is to stay close, stay smart, and keep moving forward. We're in this together." Maya tried to hold back the tears that were threatening to surface again. It wasn't that she was scared. She was terrified, actually, but there was more to it. There was this sense of confusion, this overwhelming desire to understand what had just happened to her. How had she gone from a quiet night at home to facing down a biker thug and meeting mysterious strangers in black SUVs? Her life had changed in an instant, and she didn't know if she was ready for everything that was coming. But one thing was clear. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. She wasn't the same person anymore. She was stronger, yes. But she was also more exposed, more vulnerable. "Thanks," she said, her voice steadier now, though still thick with emotion, "for everything. I'm not sure I could have done it without you guys." Jason gave her a small, approving nod. "You've already proven you can do more than most people ever could. Don't ever forget that." Keanu's eyes softened just a touch. "You've got what it takes, Maya, and we've got your back." The moment hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken bond between them. In that brief silence, Maya understood something. They weren't just protecting her. They were preparing her. She wasn't going to stay in the dark forever. The truth, whatever it was, would come to light. But in the meantime, they would teach her how to survive in this new world, this world of danger and shadowy figures, until she could stand on her own. As they stepped into the house, Jason and Keanu made their way to the living room, where plans for the next steps would unfold. Maya lingered by the door for a moment, still processing everything she had just heard. This wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about something bigger, something that would take all of them to unravel. Before stepping inside, she turned back, looking at the street where everything had changed. She still felt the buzz of fear in her chest, but now it was tempered with something else. Determination. Whatever came next, she was going to face it head-on, and she wasn't going to face it alone. What will Maya discover about herself and the people around her in the coming days? How far will Jason, Keanu, and the mysterious forces go to achieve their goals? The days that followed were unlike any Maya had ever known. The house, once a place of peace and safety, now felt like a fortress under constant surveillance. Jason and Keanu kept a close watch, not just on the house, but on everything around them. Every street corner, every shadow seemed to hold a secret, and Maya quickly learned that the world she once knew had turned upside down. It wasn't just Frank and his associates anymore. The more Jason and Keanu dug into the mystery, the more they realized they were dealing with something far bigger, something with tentacles that reached deep into the city's underbelly. They had no idea how far this rabbit hole went, but they were committed to following it until the end. One afternoon, Maya sat on the couch flipping through old photo albums. It was a quiet moment, a moment where she could pretend for just a few seconds that her life hadn't been turned into something out of a spy thriller. The pictures of her family and friends brought a bittersweet comfort, but it also reminded her of the normal life she had lost. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Maya's heart skipped a beat. It was always the unexpected moments that shook her the most. She quickly put the album down and stood up, her legs stiff from sitting too long. Jason and Keanu were nowhere in sight. They'd been investigating leads all morning, so she was alone. She cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood outside, tall and dressed in a suit that seemed too formal for the neighborhood. His face was familiar, but she couldn't place it. His smile was unsettling, too perfect, too rehearsed. Maya hesitated, but opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man's smile widened. "I'm here on behalf of someone who wants to meet you. Someone who's been watching you, Maya." Her stomach dropped. "Who are you?" "Let's just say I'm a messenger," he said. "I have an offer you won't want to refuse." Before Maya could respond, Jason's voice called from behind her. "Maya, get away from the door." Startled, she turned around to see Jason and Keanu approaching quickly, their expressions grim. The man's smile faltered just for a moment, but he quickly recovered, stepping back and raising his hands in mock surrender. "I think it's time for you to go," Keanu said, his voice cold and unwavering. The man looked from one to the other, his eyes narrowing. "You don't understand," he said, a hint of menace creeping into his tone. "The people I work for are beyond your reach. You can't protect her forever, and when the time comes, you'll wish you had taken the deal." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the street before either Jason or Keanu could stop him. Maya stood frozen at the door, her mind racing. "Who was that?" she asked, looking at Jason, then Keanu. "And what deal was he talking about?" Jason stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "That was someone tied to the people who are after you, Maya. They've got their eyes on you, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Keanu nodded, his eyes sharp as he scanned the street. "This is bigger than Frank, much bigger. And if they're offering you deals like that, it means they're trying to pull you into something you won't be able to get out of." Maya felt her head spin. It was all happening so fast. She hadn't even had time to process everything that had already happened. And now this mysterious person was showing up with cryptic warnings and threats. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are we supposed to do?" Jason gave her a hard look, his expression hardening. "Now we find out exactly who's pulling the strings, and we make sure you're safe, no matter what it takes." But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they weren't telling her. There was more to this than just her safety, more than the threats and the menacing figures who seemed to be hunting her down. She had a nagging suspicion that she was a pawn in a much bigger game, a game she hadn't fully grasped yet. That night, as they sat around the kitchen table, Jason and Keanu exchanged quiet words. Maya tried to listen, but the conversation was too vague, too cryptic for her to make sense of. They didn't want to drag her further into the mess. She could see that. But they didn't realize that she was already deep in it. After a long silence, Maya spoke up. "What is this really about? What do they want from me?" Keanu looked at her, his gaze piercing. "You've been caught in something much bigger than you realize, Maya. These people, they're connected to a network of powerful individuals. People who control things from the shadows. And you're a piece of their puzzle, but we don't know why yet." Jason nodded. "It's not about what they want from you. It's about what they're willing to do to get it." Maya stood up, her hands trembling. "What if I don't want to be part of their game? What if I just want to be left alone?" Jason looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. "I get it. Believe me, I do. But this is no longer just about you, Maya. This is about taking down a system that's been manipulating lives for far too long. And you're stronger than you know. You have the power to change things, to make sure they don't win. Keanu stood up, his posture rigid. But we can't do it alone. We need to trust each other, and we need to stay ahead of them. Because if we don't, they'll be the ones calling the shots. Maya felt the weight of their words pressing down on her. She wasn't sure she was ready for this fight, but there was no going back. The deal had already been made, and now she had to play her part. What choice did she have? What's the real purpose behind the mysterious forces targeting Maya? What lengths will Jason and Keanu go to protect her, and can they stay one step ahead of the game? The night seemed to stretch on forever, as though time itself was holding its breath. Maya sat on the couch, staring at the quiet shadows in the corner of the room. Jason and Keanu had been in constant motion all week, tracking down leads, making calls, and setting up an intricate web of surveillance around her. Still, there was no real plan yet, just a promise to protect her from the unknown forces that were closing in. She could feel it, the pressure building around her, the weight of everything that had been set into motion. Each minute that passed felt like a countdown to something inevitable. The house, the safe haven she thought she had, was no longer a sanctuary. It was a cage. Her mind raced with questions, but there were no answers to be found. All she knew was that it was coming to a head. Suddenly the door to the living room opened and Jason stepped in. His face was more serious than she had ever seen, a storm of thoughts swirling in his eyes. "It's time," he said. "They know where we... Garth, they're coming." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had heard Jason talk about this moment, the one when it would all come crashing down. But hearing him say it, feeling the finality in his words, made it all too real. Keanu followed closely behind, his expression unreadable. "We've set up the perimeter," he said, his voice calm, betraying no sign of the tension that had been building all week. "But this time we need to take the fight to them." Maya's heart hammered in her chest. "What do you mean? What fight?" Jason approached her, his eyes softening just for a moment. "We're not just defending you anymore. We're going to take down the people behind all of this, whoever they are. We don't have the luxury of waiting for them to make the next move. We need to be the ones in control." Maya swallowed hard. The realization hit her like a freight train. She was no longer just a victim in someone else's game. She was part of this now. There was no escaping it, no turning back. "What do I need to do?" Maya asked, her voice steady, but her pulse racing. Jason gave her a small nod of approval. "Stay close. Trust us. And when it's time, do exactly what we tell you." They quickly moved into action. The house was locked down, every door and window secured, but there was no illusion that they were truly safe. This was only a temporary refuge. Jason and Keanu had been coordinating with their contacts, gathering intel on the mysterious people who were hunting Maya. They didn't know exactly who they were, but they knew they were powerful. And they were dangerous. Maya's mind spun, the weight of it all threatening to break her. She had been caught in the middle of something she couldn't control, and now her survival depended on people she barely knew. Jason and Keanu had become her lifelines, but even they couldn't guarantee anything. All she had was trust and her growing sense of urgency that time was running out. As the night wore on, the tension mounted. Every little noise from outside sent them on high alert. The occasional headlights of passing cars seemed like they could be the ones. But every time they waited in silence, hoping it wasn't the moment. Then, just past midnight, the silence was broken by the unmistakable roar of motorcycles. Jason's face hardened, his hand going to the gun holstered at his side. "Get ready," he muttered. "They're here." Keanu's expression was stone cold. "We stick to the plan. We take them out before they can make a move." Maya's stomach twisted in fear, but she forced herself to focus. The motorcycles had stopped outside, their engines roaring as they cut through the stillness of the night. She could hear footsteps, several sets, moving fast toward the house. Jason and Keanu didn't waste any time. They moved quickly through the house, slipping into positions they had prepared earlier. Maya followed them, her heart thudding in her chest. This wasn't just a standoff, this was a battle that would determine whether she walked out of this alive or whether she became another casualty of a world she hadn't chosen to be a part of. The door exploded open. The figures stepped in, masked and armed. Frank, the biker, was at the front, his face twisted in a grin of pure malice. He wasn't alone. Several more men, dressed in dark leather jackets, followed him into the room, their weapons drawn. They hadn't come to negotiate. They had come to end it. Jason and Keanu were already moving. Keanu made the first move, a swift, calculated strike. That took down one of the men in a blur of motion. Jason was right behind him, using his martial prowess to incapacitate another. It was clear they weren't just fighters, they were professionals. But Frank wasn't backing down. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on Maya. His grin spread wider, almost as if this moment was the one he'd been waiting for. "Maya," he said, his voice low and menacing. "It's over. You don't belong in this world. You should have taken the deal." Maya stood frozen, her fists clenched at her sides. There was no going back, but she wasn't afraid, not anymore, not when she had Jason and Keanu at her side. Without warning, Maya lunged forward. In one swift motion, she grabbed a piece of metal from the floor and swung it at Frank's head. The blow caught him off guard, knocking him off balance. Jason and Keanu quickly seized the opportunity. Together, they took down the rest of the men with precision and speed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about making sure Frank and his associates understood that they weren't the ones in control anymore. In the chaos, Maya found herself face to face with Frank once more. He was down, struggling to get up, but his eyes burned with fury. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll never be safe." Jason stepped forward, his face a mask of resolve. "You're right, it's not over, but it's over for you." With one final decisive move, Jason incapacitated Frank, taking him out of the equation for good. The room fell silent, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. Jason, Keanu, and Maya stood together, breathing heavily, the reality of the fight they had just won settling in. Maya exhaled, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. Just a little. "Is it really over?" Keanu nodded slowly. "This battle is, but the war, that's a different story." Jason placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but firm. "You've made it through the worst of it, Maya. Now we move forward. Together." And for the first time in a long while, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a family, a team, and a future that was worth fighting for. What lies ahead for Maya and her protectors? Can they keep the forces chasing her at bay? The fight is far from over, but one thing is clear. Maya's fight for survival has only just begun. Stay tuned for more action and suspense. Hit subscribe and leave a comment below to share what you think happens next.